Preparations have been going on for weeks, but for the enthusiast, the long weekend at Longford really begins with the arrival of the big men in the big cars. Tasmania is an island, so they must come by air or by sea, sometimes at considerable expense, which not all can expect to recoup in prize money. Yet year after year they arrive in increasing numbers, men and machines from all over Australia and from New Zealand, men who will be driving perhaps in their first big league races, and men whose names are respected on the famed circuits of Europe and the United Kingdom. Longford lies on the South Esk River, some 15 miles from Launceston, the northern capital of Tasmania. A typical small Tasmanian country centre in a typical setting. Nothing much has changed Longford since pioneering days. It has no suburban crowding, no peak hour traffic tangles, no great noisy marshalling yards or smoke-belching factories, but it does have what has become recognised as the fastest and best Grand Prix circuit in the South Pacific. And this is why they come to Longford. Grand Prix racing began over 50 years ago in Europe and grew out of the realisation that cars are built to run on roads and streets, with bends and corners, hills and dales, bridges and bumps, and this is where their designs must be proved. Longford is a true road circuit, 4.5 miles of it, including a bit of round the houses in the best continental tradition. Let's have a look at some of the big cars of the racing world. One immediately notices that they're really very small. They look too small indeed to accomplish anything like 100 miles an hour, let alone the 180 or so which many are capable of reaching. What's it like to drive a Grand Prix car? Well, first off, they have very direct steering, and gears, 5 of them, and not a synchromesh in the lot. In the final on Monday, the drivers will change up and down literally hundreds of times, and they daren't miss one change. Here is Lex Davison, 4 times winner of the Australian Grand Prix, and his description of this 4.5-mile Longford circuit.
We're doing about 120 miles per hour as we pass the start-finish line and change up to 4th and then 5th gear just before the water tower. At 130 miles per hour, we round the gradual right-hand sweep and manage to pull over 6,000 revs before the hump which takes us downhill. Then we shut off and slip back into 4th to prepare to take the difficult viaduct. We brake hard at the 150-yard mark and then go back to 2nd to take the left-hander under the viaduct. Accelerating hard past the trees, we go up to 3rd and 4th, drifting off Kingsbridge at about 130 miles per hour. We're now heading for the village, and we shut off early here at the 200-yard marker because the hump in the road will make you airborne. There are 2 quick changes, and then it's right out to the left to take a wide arc round the pub corner. It's full acceleration as we take 3rd, 4th and 5th gear down Tannery Straight at about 160 miles per hour. At the 300-yard mark, we brake and come back to 2nd for the tight Tannery corner, using full acceleration to get through and then selecting 3rd on the run to Long Bridge. We rush across the bridge with the power on in an even flow, accelerating hard off it and slide uphill towards Newry Corner. We go uphill in 1st, 2nd, 3rd and 4th and eventually select 5th at 140 miles per hour past the curving left-hander at the top of the slope. Then it's full speed down the Flying Mile, hitting between 160 and 170 miles per hour through the timed section. Keep the throttle hard open until the 300-yard marker, then use the brakes hard and the gearbox to come down to barely 20 miles per hour or so on the very slow Mountford corner. When we're in 1st gear, we take the corner very slowly without any slide so that the maximum straight-line acceleration can be achieved. So it's up to 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th again down Pitt Straight.
Not a bad lap. The present lap record for racing cars is 2 minutes 21.3 seconds, an average of 114 miles an hour held by Jack Brabham. But it seems possible the record will go this weekend. The Longford circuit makes 2 crossings of the South Esk. At both bridges, skin divers keep constant vigil during racing. The early ones have begun to arrive. forerunners of thousands for whom the long weekend at Longford has become the most eagerly awaited event of the year. It's Friday, the 28th of February, 1964. All is in readiness. There is nothing to do but wait. At long last, Longford's long weekend is underway. And from the sound of things, the meeting will be a roaring success. Hundreds of thousands of pounds of the world's fastest motor racing machinery, combined with world champion drivers, skilled mechanics, and a first-class racing circuit, should ensure the best that motor racing can provide for the thousands who flock to Longford. Motor racing enthusiasts come from all parts of Tasmania and the Australian mainland to Longford, and by the starting time of the first event, the stands are already filling rapidly. A record field of 44 cars has entered for the opening event, a handicap for sports and touring cars confined to Tasmanian entrants and drivers. The cars range in size from an NSU Prince and Mini Miners through Australian Holdens to E-Type Jaguars and big Fords. Inevitably, there are some whose early enthusiasm in such a race lands them in the kind of spin they didn't quite bargain on. But fortunately, there's no real damage done. Car 38 is known as the Purple Petrol Eater. An average speed of 60 miles an hour for the 22.5 miles is recorded by the winner, and the stage is set for the feature event of the first day, the Australian Tourist Trophy over 23 laps, 103.5 miles. The seconds tick by, and the starter sends the high-class field away. A field including Australian aces Bib Stilwell in a Cooper Monaco, Frank Matich in a Lotus 19B, and Bob Jane in an E-Type Jaguar. Cars all capable of over 150 miles an hour on the Longford Flying Mile. From the start, Stilwell has the Cooper running sweetly as he leads Matich. Sprite is an early casualty, while Stilwell and Matich continue their duel, hotly pursued by Bob Jane and the Jaguar, all three reeling off lap after lap at an average speed of over 100 miles an hour. Both Stilwell, a Victorian, and Matich from New South Wales have won the Gold Star, the highest award of the Confederation of Australian Motorsport, while Bob Jane, also a Victorian, is recognised as Australia's most outstanding touring car driver. There's a sensation two-thirds of the way through the race when a pit sign announces that Stilwell has been disqualified. The terms of the Tourist Trophy require a standing start, but Stilwell, failing to coax the engine of his Cooper Monaco to fire, had been push-started into automatic disqualification. Matich is now the leader in the Lotus 19, with Jane chasing him in second place. Local driver John Pooley in his Pooley Mark II is a near casualty, while Jane has extracted the last ounce out of the Jaguar in an effort to catch Matich, hitting 156 on the Flying Mile. Jane's chase is in vain as Matich holds his lead, and in the meantime, Stilwell has re-entered the race after appealing against his disqualification. Stilwell finishes, but his appeal is dismissed, with Matich winning by 28 seconds from Jane at an average speed of 101 miles an hour. A modified Le Mans start is introduced for the touring car scratch race over 10 laps of 45 miles. A race divided into 4 classes and including a wide variety of cars from Mini Coopers through Cortinas, Holdens to Bob Jane's 4.1-litre Jaguar. This is the most successful touring car in Australian motor racing. And right from the start, it's Jane leading. First from Bill Burns in a 3.4 Jaguar and then Jim McEwen in a Lotus Cortina. Bob Jane provides a thrilling exhibition of driving for the big crowd as he thrashes the Jaguar around the 4.5 miles Longford circuit in a tick over 3 minutes, an average speed of 90 miles an hour. In one burst in the straight, he reaches 142 miles an hour, equaling his own record for the highest speed ever reached in a touring car on the Longford Flying Mile. The further the race progresses, the more Jane increases his lead over Jim McEwen. It's not only Jane who provides the thrills for the crowd. Local driver John Youl brings a gasp of excitement as he spins out in his hole. For Victorian George Russell in a Cortina GT, Mountford corner brings a check which might well have been marked not negotiable. McEwen's chase after Jane is in vain, and with the Jaguar averaging 86 miles an hour, Bob Jane flashes across the finishing line a minute clear of McEwen. The tension builds for the second and final day, and the crowds are there early to see the champions in their final practice session before the day's racing begins. And if it's thrills thereafter, they're certainly in for plenty on this day. Sydney driver Bill Burns crashes spectacularly at 100 miles an hour. Burns had received an oil on track sign, and when he touched the brakes, they locked, causing the car to roll 3 times before crashing into a tree. Miraculously, Burns is extricated from the wrecked Jaguar, unharmed except for a slight scratch on his lower lip. No more racing at Longford this year for Bill Burns and his Jaguar, but you don't worry quite so much about thousands of pounds of car when you know you're lucky to be alive. The big motorcycle event of the day is the South Pacific 500cc Championship over 10 laps of 45 miles. The A and B grade races being run concurrently and attracting an entry of 38 well-tuned machines. Motorcycle events at Longford this year are dominated by Kelvin Carruthers, a 25-year-old mechanic from Sydney who leads from the start of the race. Carruthers, riding a 499cc Norton, is riding at Longford for the first time and obviously shows a liking for the typical European circuit. It's quite a change to get on something and go a little faster, he says. One gets tired of rushing round the little circuits on the mainland. The sharply angled Mountford corner causes more spills than any other on the Longford circuit. Kel Carruthers speeds on to increase his lead to 20 seconds over his nearest rival, Victorian Malcolm Stanton. Carruthers averages 90 for the 45 miles with a top speed of 128 miles an hour. And when he glides around Mountford and into the final straight, he records his 5th win for the meeting from 5 starts. Now it's time for the big one, the 3rd South Pacific Gold Star Championship and final race of the Tasman Cup Series. Tasmanian John Youl is well fancied. Jack Brabham and Graham Hill are both world champions, and Frank Matich can't be discounted either. Twice world champion, Jack Brabham of Australia wants to win this one. He's driven brilliantly in his own Repco Brabham to win successive races at Sandown Park in Victoria, Warwick Farm in New South Wales and Lakeside in Queensland, and a win at Longford would give him a perfect score in the Australian section of the Tasman Cup. Away go the 16 starters on the first of their 25 laps to take them a distance of 112.5 miles, a journey that's going to be covered in close to an hour of slogging driving. It's a fine representative field, including Brabham, Hill, New Zealanders McLaren, Shelley and Palmer, and top Australians Gardner, Davison, Stilwell, Youl and Matich. From the start, Hill's scarlet Repco Brabham chases its green counterpart driven by the popular Brabham, with Stilwell in another Repco Brabham and Bill Patterson in his white Cooper Climax, well placed early in the race. Brabham and Hill are already lapping at 112 miles an hour, and Stilwell's keeping with them, closely attended by Matich in a Brabham Climax. Brabham roars down the flying mile at over 160, and at the moment he's travelling like a winner, with 2 seconds to spare over Hill, and Matich now third, having taken Stilwell in the straight. It's a trouble-free race so far, but Tasmanian John Youl loses many valuable seconds as he completely misses Mountford Corner in his Cooper Climax. Brabham, Hill and Matich lead through the viaduct, and Bruce McLaren, who started from the rear of the grid, has shot through the field to pass Stilwell and move into fourth place. The cool Englishman won't let Brabham get far away, but the Australian is looking confident and holds his 2 seconds advantage, with Matich driving a fine race and pacing it all the way with the international stars. Brabham looks relaxed, despite the fact that he's now lapping the 4.5-mile circuit in 2 minutes 24 seconds, an average speed of 112.5 miles an hour, and he's already lapping the slower cars. Brabham leads Hill and Matich through the viaduct on lap 7. In an effort to burn Hill off, Brabham thrashes the Repco Brabham around Newry into the flying mile, both cars hitting 164 miles an hour, and the pit signal announces Brabham's lead over Hill as 3 seconds, with both drivers covering the lap in 2 minutes 24.3 seconds. The battle of the Repco Brabhams continues, with Brabham and Hill, winners of 3 world championships between them, both striving for that little bit extra to decide the issue. Brabham hurtles down the flying mile close to top speed and is rewarded with the news that he's gained 2 more precious seconds on Hill with a 2:23.6 lap. With the race now more than half over, Hill begins his attack to whittle down Brabham's lead, with Bruce McLaren now in 3rd position. Finally, the strain has told on Brabham's car, and much to the general disappointment, his transmission gives up. Brabham is out, and Hill hits the front with a comfortable lead of 11 seconds over McLaren. In an effort to get with Hill and Brabham earlier in the race, Bruce McLaren had set the fastest lap time of the race at 2 minutes 23.3 seconds, over 113 miles an hour, but he's too far behind to make much impression on Hill. They're in the last lap, and Hill retains his lead of over 10 seconds from McLaren, with Matich driving consistently right through the race, holding 3rd place. Graham Hill goes round Mountford Corner for the last time and coasts down the finishing straight to win by just over 10 seconds from Bruce McLaren, then 28 seconds to Frank Matich, who just holds off the fast-finishing Stilwell for 3rd place. Hill's Repco Brabham has performed magnificently to complete the 112.5 miles in a fraction over 60 minutes at an average speed of 111.73 miles an hour. His sportsmanship in picking up the less fortunate Jack Brabham on his victory lap of honour is genuinely appreciated. Hill pays a further tribute to Brabham after the race by declaring that it was Brabham's race right up to the time of his withdrawal. But no one would begrudge the modest Londoner his fine win. His quiet determination and brilliant driving carried him to the World Championship in 1962, and he was runner-up last year to the Scot Jim Clark. Hill receives the laurel wreath from the Tasmanian Premier, the Honourable Eric Rees, patron of the Longford Motor Racing Association, who comments that Hill had followed in the steps of Jack Brabham, Roy Salvadori, John Surtees and Bruce McLaren, all winners at their first appearance at Longford. Hill said in reply that he would very much like to return to Longford next year for the Australian Grand Prix. The first Tasman Cup for competition between Australian and New Zealand drivers is won by the popular New Zealander Bruce McLaren. This despite Jack Brabham's hat-trick of wins at Sandown, Warwick Farm and Lakeside. McLaren dominated the 4 races in New Zealand, as Brabham did those in Australia, but the New Zealander had enough minor placings to score a comfortable victory over Brabham. Graham Hill has won the 3rd South Pacific Championship. Bruce McLaren has won the first Tasman Cup, and Longford is over for another year. Once again, this 4.5 miles of picturesque Tasmanian road, described as the finest and fastest road circuit in Australasia, has produced a world-class weekend of motor racing.